Okay, great. So I hope everyone has had a good day today and that you're ready for today's session. So, like you saw, Ian could not make it to today's session because he has a meeting. So, yeah, today it's Joseph who is taking us through the mentorship. So, I'm Catherine, I'm part of Spacia Tech, but I also attend the mentorships because it's good to learn and it's not a bad thing to get more knowledge. Yeah, so Joseph, I think we can just get started.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. So I think Pauline, you're the one remaining to present. So like today we'll look at I think it's promises, be presented by Pauline, and then I'll present modules. And then I also like go through that other code that we were supposed to go through yesterday. So Pauline, maybe will you start or should I start?
I can start. I have no problem.
Go ahead.
So I was supposed to talk about promises. So I'll share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can see it.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So I'll start. I wrote some notes, so that's what I'll be going through quickly so that because of time. So what is a promise? A promise is an object that represents completion either. Hopefully you can see clearly. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
Promise is an object that represents completion, either successful. Completion of a code, either successful or failed, and it's an asynchronous process. So I tried also to explain what asynchronous is. So in JavaScript, there's synchronous and asynchronous. In synchronous is when a code is run sequence, like the previous one has to be complete before the next one is executed. So for an example, over here, let me do it with yeah. So here I have like that's a synchronous. Okay, this is a synchronous. So if you want to console log maybe 1, 3 up to 3. This process happens with asynchronous. So for the first one has to be completed so that the second one is completed like that. So the previous one has to be complete before the next one is started. So if I run this, you'll see it's 1, 2, 3. And for asynchronous is different, whereby this same process, a code can be run at the same time. So like this one, if you look at this one, the output should be 1, then 3 as 3 is being executed. Also, this is also being executed. So node.js. Yeah, so you see 1, 3, 2. So promises use this asynchronous processes are being processed at the same time. An example like I usually like using that I understand promises is, let's say I go to Java, yeah, and I decide I want, the waiter comes and decides, I decide that I want iced coffee, macchiato. So I'll tell the waiter I want the iced coffee macchiato, and he'll go and tell the barista ABCD wants this, and then the waiter, when the coffee is ready, the waiter will bring. So in this scenario, I am the consumer, the waiter is the promise, and the barista is the server where we are setting some data or we're trying to fetch data from. So back to my notes, as I have explained everything about asynchronous, synchronous. So in promises, we have states, we have properties. So you have state and you have results. With state, like when the waiter, when you have told the waiter, I want this iced coffee macchiato. So the waiter, at that point, the process is, the state is pending. We don't know if the coffee will come back. We don't know if the coffee will be poured. We don't know. So in the beginning, the state is usually pending, and after the waiter brings, it's resolved, like it's successful. In case maybe there's no coffee or there's something missing and they can't, the barista cannot make my coffee, or like I ordered something that sounded weird, they don't have something like that, I will get back a reject. So in promises, if you try and fetch something and maybe you misspell your endpoint, it will bring back an error, and that's a reject. And then, of course, we have a result. Initially, again, result is undefined. And then when the results come back and it's successful, we have a value. If it's not, of course, we have an error. So if it's rejected, we have an error. So I'll go back to another example. Example 3 over here. As you can see, I'm trying to do a successful promise. So we have a promise here. We pass a function to this constructor, which is an executor. So this function is like an executor. So when we pass resolve and reject as the arguments, parameters that is, and then if we get success, so in this scenario it was a success. So I was trying to set it like after 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, I want you to return done. So it would return done, and that means our state would change from being pending to successful. And if in case there was an error, it would bring back reject. And it's only one of, between the arguments, only one can happen at one time. So that was for successful. If a failed one, the same scenario, we get a reject. Let me comment this out. We get a reject in case we have something wrong. Back to my notes. So we cannot be able to access these properties. We have to use methods. So the properties, the state and result, we can't just access them. So we have to use methods. And this method, these are .then, .catch, and .finally. With hopefully, is there any question up to where I am so far? Or any additional information someone would want to add, clarification? I'm guessing that's a yes. I'll continue.
Can you come up again?
I'm asking,
Yeah.
is there any question, clarification, or any additional information someone would want to add? Okay. Sawa. Yes. Which concept? Async. Okay. With async, with this, let's go back to this example. Synchronous. Synchronous is the previous one has to be completed before the next one is done. But with asynchronous, the previous can be the previous can miss to be completed before the next one has completed. So example, with this, when you console log 1, here we get 1. We're going to get 1. But at the same time, the set out is also being executed, but we are going to get 3 before we get this. Because again, I've also set a timer for after 1 second, I need to get I need you to console, I need the computer to console 2. So this means that these processes are happening at the same time. They're asynchronous, they're happening at the same time. So the first one will be executed at the same time the second one is being processed, at the same time the third one is being processed. So 3 will be consoled out before the 2 is a minute.
Before she comes back, maybe I can add a little bit on synchronous versus asynchronous code. So in JavaScript, there are basically like two paradigms of writing code, and we basically use both of them at the same time. So in this case, like from line 1 to line 4, that is synchronous code, because like JS will executes from top to bottom, and it goes reading one line at a time. So in this case, when JS comes across these 3 lines, it will console log 1 to 3. But now in the case of asynchronous code, we are not really sure what we'll get back. For example, if I want to make a request to a server, I don't own that server. It's owned by someone else. It might be down, like something might be wrong with that server. I'm not sure of the response that I'll get from that server if I do a request to it. So now that's an example of a asynchronous code, something that has to take some time to resolve in either a success or a failure. So yeah, in this case, like promises can have 3 states, as Pauline has said. It can be either pending. So for example, a pending promise is one that is still like resolving. Maybe you've sent like a get request from a server for maybe products. Before that request is fulfilled, it will be pending. The promise will be pending, and then it will, after pending, it will either be like fulfilled successfully with your data, your products, or it will be rejected with an error. So for example, if there's an error on the server, you'll get a rejected on the promise. And then now when you come to consume the promise, you can either use a try catch so that you can catch that error, or you can now chain dot then and dot then and dot catch. I think that's where Pauline is heading now. Pauline, are you back?
Yeah, actually that's that's the process I'm going. So I'm trying to explain the asynchronous so that when it comes to promises it's easier to understand.
Okay. Okay. I was just trying to add a
And
bit of information
yeah,
if we can
yeah,
continue.
yeah, thank you so much. Okay, I've lost my train of thoughts, but I think I was here. Yeah, so yeah, that's what Joseph also added. That's how it happened. So to the next one, so yeah, so there's a dot then, there's a dot catch, what also Joseph has touched on, and there's a dot finally. So with dot then, we pass 2 arguments in it. So these arguments are functions. remember we have states, and in state we have reject or resolved. And with dot then, we also have to pass a function as an argument that will have a result that is successful or a reject. At the same time, also with that reject, we can always use the dot catch to catch an error, to get an error back to us. Back to an example. This is a successful dot then. So we have also like this one. So I can try and run this on my web. But I think I'll have to stop sharing my screen so that you can see what I'm trying to show. Let me stop and then I share again. It's giving a look, but hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm trying to do. So we can refresh. So we have a promise here that we want to resolve, and then we want a success. So this is a success example of a dot then. So with a new promise, we have new promise, we pass an argument, we set a timeout of 1,000, and after 1,000 millisecond, and after 1 second, I want you to print, to give me an alert of this. So if I refresh that, you'll see an alert done. Okay. With a failed one, it's the same scenario, only that it will give an error. Like it will alert with an error after the given amount of time. So I had set it for 2000 to, this one is supposed even to be before. I have an error somewhere. So done. And then it's also supposed to give me a whoops. I don't know where the issue is. But basically, it's the same concept as the previous one. So back again to my notes. You can't see. Can you see? It's looped. Cinder.
Yeah, it's looping. Try and just share just one tab or one window.
Yeah. As I had said, with dot then, it passes two arguments, a function that's for successful. Well, of course, when you have a resolved promise, you get a value, and if you have a reject, you get an error. And also with dot catch, rather than putting the error function inside the dot then, you just use it on dot catch. I'll show you a better example with dot catch below. And then for dot finally, it just like cleans things up. It just makes things be okay, basically. And then we have also a way you can also write a promise using async or await, but I'll first explain a good scenario using dot then, and then I'll use I'll use async and await. Yeah, so Any questions so far? Any additional information? Okay. I don't know how I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the output without giving a loop. Let me try again. Hopefully it won't give a loop. Okay, still doing that. Any advice on what I should do so that I can show you both the outputs and the code? I don't know what I should do.
Which option are you selecting for presenting?
A window.
Okay. Try and close tabs that you're not using or windows that you're not using.
Okay.
Yeah. And just remain with what you want to present.
Okay. So I share an entire screen or just, let me try entire screen and see if it will give a loop. It's still doing the same.
You can just change the tab, just share the screen and then just change tabs.
Okay.
Like don't show the tab for the meeting.
But also I would want to share the code.
I think to share both screens, you'll have to share the whole entire screen.
The entire
Just the
screen.
window. Yeah.
Okay. Because if I do with the entire window, it's giving a loop. Well, it won't. Yeah, it's giving a loop. Okay.
Tab.
Just change tabs. Yeah.
Okay. Is that okay?
That's good.
That's fine.
Yes.
Because now I can't see what I'm doing. Okay.
You put them side to side.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So using the word fetch, we can use fetch. We are fetching a promise, yeah. So, we're fetching a URL or something. So I use a flower, a simple example to show a .then. So we have, as I had explained, how .then works. So there's a .then. So in the first argument, I pass in a response. So I would like to get a response. And if we console out the response, this is what we get from the flower. So this flower is on my computer. It's on my local machine. So after I console out, I figure out what is there. And then after that, I tell my promise, also, I'd like to get the results after you're done getting me the promise the response and converting it. Blob goes with images. So after I get that, I would also like to get the results. So I have results here. And for a better example, you're going to now to display it. So also the dot catch, what I said, you can put the dot catch, the error in the dot catch. So so in this example, I'm trying to display this on my DOM. So I do, as the previous example, I do a dot then with a response. Change, because without doing a dot blob, it won't be able to understand what I'm doing, like converting this image to what DOM can understand. So after I get the response, I want the results, and then I would like to display the results to whomever is trying to see it. So I use a dot get ID. I have a HTML file here with an ID, with image ID, and then convert it so that DOM can be able to understand this source, and it will display that. So in case maybe I write flowers, my ID, there's nothing called flowers, it should give me an error. As here you can see it's giving me an error. So with a dot catch, it will give back a reject. So in this point, the state at this point is reject, and the result is an error. And when it was okay, the state was resolved, and the result, we got a value which is an image now I can display. So that's using a dot then. It's quite interesting, but I personally like using await and the async and await. I find it more easy and more easy to understand. So this example, the next example here is the same with a dot then and a dot async. So the only difference is that with async, we don't use the dot then, though you can use async with dot then, but I personally like using with await. So with async function, in my notes here, I have a simple explanation. Async makes the function to return a promise, and await makes the function to wait for the promise. Okay, and await makes the function to pause, so it will pause the execution. So remember, I told you what you are passing inside here is an execution. So it will first pause, get what you're getting, and then we await this, fetching this. When it's done, okay, fine, it goes to the next one. We await this one, and then eventually it will give me the results. So I think you can use them with endpoints. So an endpoint is like a URL. It's actually a URL. So with async, you use a async function, a const. So you can call this anything. So I called it response, which equals to await. We wait, we get this endpoint. So if we check out this, it has some data in it. Sorry. It has some data. I don't know why it's not displaying how I want it. Yeah, so it has some data in it. There's a login ID. It's just a random URL I got in the internet. So example of this is like also when you're using Netflix, Twitter. You fetch from an API. You try and get data from an API, and then you display what you'd like to display. So, for example, if I was to console log out the ID, I would see it here in the console. We're supposed to see the ID of the results. Is it not displaying? Interesting. It's ID results response. But basically, it should show me. Let me console log out the previous one. Anyone who sees a problem? Async function.
Maybe call the function. Are you call the function?
Oh yeah, I haven't called the function. Oh yeah, so we get the ID. If you'd like to get the login, you can as well put it here. So with promises, it's good when I use it when I'm fetching API data. Yeah, so also when you start using frameworks, it's the same thing you use to fetch APIs. Yeah, so basically that's all I had to present, unless there's any question or any additional information. Any clarification?
Question maybe.
Okay.
How do you handle errors in async await?
Oh yeah,
Since
sorry.
you saw.
Oh, so after you're done with all this, you can always add a dot catch. Let's see. Joseph, can you help me out here?
But the
I
async await.
think.
Yeah. Okay. Just
Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, like you're mixing in the dot dents and the try catch. Like for async await, you either use the try catch, or
Oh
I
yes,
think you can catch.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can always use a try catch, sorry. So we move this in here. And then can always catch an error, so console log. Yeah, so in case we spell, it needs to give me an error. So yeah. Yeah, that's all. Sorry, I had also forgotten there's a try and catch. These things, I just get confused at times. Any other question? Okay. So yeah, that's all that I had to present. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a nice presentation. And also thanks, Albert. Albert has actually pointed a very key thing that most people don't look at when they're writing code. So if your code like might throw an error, you always have to like have logic to handle that error. Instead of the error breaking your app, you need to have logic to handle it. So yeah, if it's maybe like a production app, you can have a logic for logging the error to like a text document or something. You can even work in a notification system or something. Yeah, so that's very important. If you're working with code that might throw an error, especially async code, yeah, don't forget to handle your errors. And a nice way of handling errors is using the try catch. Okay, so I think if we don't have any other question, we can.
Joseph,
Albert.
you've used the word throw a lot, and I normally see throw used somewhere inside the code. Maybe you could help me. When do I use throw or something like when do I throw an error? Not when do I throw an error, but how do I use the throw keyword? That is
The throw keyword.
Yeah.
So basically, if you want like an error, you see the way like you get errors that look like they've been produced by the browser. If you want a catchable errors, like produce a catchable error, you'll need to have some logic to throw an error. Like you have to use throw new error. Because like otherwise you won't be able to catch the error. If, for example, if you just like maybe produce a text, the JavaScript will not know that this is actually an error. But if you like throw an error, it will come out as an error and your try catch. So in this case, maybe if you're using a try catch, the catch statement will be able to catch that error. And then also if you're using .thens and then you chain a .catch at the very end, that one will also be able to catch an error that has been thrown. These ones actually, they are more or less like English. You say you throw an error, then you catch it. I think that's how I understand it.
Okay, I can help on that, Joseph. Okay, for how I understand, though, let's assume that you've created a function that you are maybe calculating the area of a rectangle or maybe a square, and then you pass a parameter, maybe you have the width and are they what? No longer width then? Height, yeah, I bet. So, and then you check whether the values sent, the values for the parameters are numbers. For instance, you can maybe check whether width is not a number. So that's why you come down and then draw an error if the parameter is not a number. But then it is not included in the try catch, but included in the function. That's how I understand it.
Okay. Maybe we'll try to exploit in code while we do the modules thing. We see whether we can be able to see how that works.
Okay.
So let me share my screen. So I think we'll start with modules first, and then we'll look at that code at the very as the last thing. So yeah, you can just create a project. Modules. mkdir is simply make directory. cd is change directory. And then code dot is open in VS Code. So before ES6, JavaScript did not have like an inbuilt module system. That is before 20, is it 2015? I think 2015. So with ES6, we finally got like native modules in JavaScript. Maybe let's say app.js. We'll look at how people used to handle, like if you have multiple JS files, maybe fetch.js, because like, in the real world, you might have hundreds of JS files in your project. So how can you like link these projects, link these JavaScript files into your project? So basically that's what we're trying to look at before ES6 and after ES6. And we'll also like look at also what was there before like ES modules became a thing. So let's assume we have, I'll just create 3. Let's just assume like we have hundreds of files right here. Names.js. So basically, before ES6, my computer is a bit honey. This is how like modules were handled before ES6. Okay. So yeah, if you go to like a massive, a big project, you'll find like hundreds of script files, all like specifying different JavaScript files, different JavaScript modules. Let's call them modules. For example, you might have one for app here, app.js, and then you can have another one. Like this is what used to happen before ES6. Names.js. I can have fetch.js. I think there are 3. Okay. You have a folder. I think by doing this, you'll be able to like understand what ES6 modules are all about. So basically, this is how you used to do it before ES6. And now after ES6, we have now support for native modules. So assuming we had the same 3 files, so in ES6, we'll just have one entry point to the application, a single entry point. Maybe you can call it app.js, like that. This is our single entry point. But now if you have modules, you have to specify a number of attributes on the script tag. The first one, it's called type. You have to say type module to tell JavaScript that you want to use ES modules. Without this particular attribute, it won't work. You'll get errors from your browser. And then, you can also use the defer keyword. So basically, this defer keyword, it will ensure that your content loads before your JavaScript starts loading, so that we don't really need to put the script inside our body tag. Before ES6, you want to do this so that your page loads fast before your JS, which you're using to interact with your page, can be loaded. But now with the defer keyword, the browser automatically knows that we first load the content of our website. And then after that is done, we now load in the modules, like the JavaScript file, the entry point in this case. You might also find async here, another keyword async. So basically the difference between defer and async is that async, you can use async to load in like maybe an external script file. In this case, maybe you want to load Bootstrap, which comes from a CDN. With a CDN, I have to like communicate with the server. So you might see async in the scripts that you get from something like a CDN. But for our local files, we just use defer. As just specifying this type module automatically gives your application now the ability to use ES modules. So basically, if you become a front-end developer, you will mostly work with ES modules. So there are different types of module systems in JS. Module, let me try to make this bigger. remove that like that. Module systems in JS. So if you end up becoming a backend developer, just make it a bit neat. Module systems in JS. So you'll get, if you work with Node.js, like the previous versions of Node, I think version 12, 14 back there, they did not have a native support for ES modules. So if you wanted to write a server using JavaScript, you'll use something called CommonJS. This is one of the most common type module systems that actually you'll find in most code bases. Basically, CommonJS, for the imports, if you want to import a file, you'll just give it a name, maybe const module is equals to require. If you've ever come across this keyword, require, and then you specify here your file name. Like, let's just go module name. This is very common. You'll still find it used right nowadays. If you want to write maybe a server using Node, but the most recent versions of Node support ES modules, so you can still use the import and the exports in Node right now if you're using like Node version, I think 16 upwards. There are other like less known module systems in JavaScript. One was called AMD, and one was called UMD. These were just like people coming up with their own module system because it was so hard and cumbersome to write such code when we didn't have like native support for ES modules. I think if we don't have any question, I'll continue. Do you have any question up to there? I guess not. So let's just continue. So this one, you have to keep a star here because you'll see it. If you want to be a backend engineer, you're a full stack engineer, you'll interact with this require syntax. So in the case of, now this is an import. This is an import. In the case of exports, because in order for a module to be imported, it has to be exported. This is the syntax that you'll see with CommonJS. Module is equals, for example, our module is called module 2. And then after you put the expressions and everything, you'll be seeing things like module.exports. Something like this. I think it's something like this. It's been a while since I wrote Node. It's either like this or like this. I'm not sure. But basically, it's like this, and then you specify your modules inside that module.exports. So this one is worth noting because you'll definitely be interacting with it. If you go and become a backend engineer, you'll definitely see this type of syntax. This is an export. So now the stuff of today is ES modules, ECMAScript modules. ESM, sometimes it's called ESM, ES modules, or ES6 modules. So whichever name you come across, it basically refers to the same thing. In ES modules, first, actually, what is the advantage of using modules of just writing like code in just one file? You'll find that modules, I think we should have even looked at the advantages as the first thing. Maybe we can come back to it. later. Let's just cover ES module while the concept for these common JS modules is still fresh. So basically in ES modules, you'll see imports. If you want to do an import, you'll use the import keyword. Import keyword. And we'll see that because we'll see that in our in an example. And if you want to export a module, use export module. So we have imports, we have exports, and we have something called dynamic imports. For dynamic imports, you can put a star here. For these two, you have to specify the type module on your script in order for you to use imports and exports, these ones. But dynamic imports can work without this type module thing. So that's one difference between the three. Another difference is that dynamic imports are used mainly for performance purposes. Let me give you an example. Assuming like we have a website and we have different types of users, right? Maybe users with different roles. We have admins, we have normal users, we have like different roles. So you might have like, maybe if someone logs in to that website, if they are a normal user, they see a certain type of profile. If they are an admin, they see a dashboard. So if you use imports and exports, your code will, the module will be imported into like one bundle. But if you use dynamic imports, you can dynamically import modules. So in this case, in our case, for example, if I'm a normal user, I'm logging into this website, I don't need to be served JavaScript for an admin because I won't ever need that JavaScript. So I can basically create a module and do a dynamic import of that module, and then only facilitate that code running on someone who has the role of admin. So that's basically what dynamic imports are. And if you've done, if you've ever heard of something called a module bundler, something like Webpack, module bundlers. This is an important concept because it has the name module in it. Examples, the OG of module bundlers is Webpack. It's pretty hard to work with. And because of that, that's why we have modern ways of doing bundling with tools like Vite. Vite is also a module bundler. Rollup is a pretty old one. And then if you followed last year, they launched Next.js 13, and you had something called TurboPack. They were calling it the successor of Webpack, this TurboPack. So it's like then the coming thing. So this one, Webpack, if you've used like Create React App or something, you've interacted with Webpack, but you can also bundle your own JavaScript files using these module bundlers. So basically, if you have a module bundler set up in your project and you're using dynamic imports, there's a concept called code splitting. Code splitting, if you've ever heard of something called code splitting. This is how this code splitting works. It's a performance thing. If you want your app, maybe it's suffering from like a supermassive bundle. You know, these bundlers, if you have like 1,000 or even 1,000,000 app like JS files in your project, this bundler will bundle everything up, do the imports and everything, and it will produce just a single bundle file for your app now. That is how these bundlers work. So in the case of code splitting, you can import some modules dynamically. Yeah, you can impose some codes dynamically, some modules dynamically. And now, when you bundle up your code, it will not like, it will take these dynamic modules and create separate JavaScript files from those dynamic modules. So you'll have a main bundle file, and then you'll have multiple like dynamic modules on the side. So these dynamic modules will only be served to users according to like the way I've told you, whether they, for example, if they're an admin, they will not be given a dynamic module that was meant for like a normal user. By doing that, you'll drastically reduce your bundle size, and then now you'll be serving like your code depending on the type of user. I hope I've tried my best to explain that. So it's you also have like to familiarize yourself with, if you're a JavaScript developer, the concept of module bundlers. You'll never escape it. So you might as well start early enough to familiarize yourself with the bundling of JavaScript code. So yeah, they have advantages. Something like Webpack, it will do code minimization. It will uglify your code. Like you see the way you write your fancy code like this, if you run it through Webpack, and maybe you have a plugin for minifying your code, this whole thing will be minified like into like a single line or something. Let's just look at minified code. So it will look something like this. So from your fancy thing with using Prettier and everything, and yeah, it will all be minified into a single like this now. By minifying and removing all the spaces, you basically also make your bundle smaller. That was a small deviation from the topic at hand, but it's pretty important to know. Yeah, so let's continue. These are the 3 types of modules. I think it's time now to like see these things in action now. Let us scroll down up to, maybe you can have, yeah. So assuming, let's run this thing first. Make sure it's working. So yeah, assuming you have, like you're creating an application, you can now start thinking of your application as in the form of like components. For example, I have like a profile, user profile. Instead of just having one app.js and just throwing all my code into that one file, I can have a user profile file, and then I call it user.js. So all the code for the user goes in here. The same way, you can come in and maybe admin profile, like that. Actually, you can just use shorter names. Admin. Maybe it's good. It's a bit slow. And then user. So you have to start thinking about your code in terms of modules. If you haven't ever thought of splitting your code, then you haven't written like a big enough application. And yeah, that's where you should be wanting to head right now. Start writing like a big enough applications where like you can practice these concepts easily. So assuming we have split our files into like that, admin.js. Can just come in here and create a simple function. Concept main, just another function that returns console.log. Just something simple like admin. So in this code, in this particular file, it's just isolated. Nobody can use it anywhere. Let's see that actually is working. Okay, it's working. So let's do something from app. So we're assuming that app is the entry point of this application. Can just it's here. This is just like a contrived example. Basically, we can have more than one file in each folder. So like we just want to have a bit of many folders and files. Where is that folder? Okay, so assuming this is how we've structured our application. So we can have this one outside. Then, because we're learning modules, let us as well name it as modules like that. So app is our app is let's I need another file to be our entry point because of the notes there. Maybe index.js. Can also throw in our app as a module. Yeah, so your project requirements is what will dictate what folders you create. This is just for demonstration purposes. So our entry point is index.js. Because we're using ES modules, we don't need to import all our files down here the way we are doing here. Let's just console log. Hi. You guys, okay, it's still here. Let's continue. Yeah, you see? So we have linked our stuff well. So assuming we have this function here, let's list some of this. User. I should have created a demo earlier, but bear with me. So basically here, entry point is here. So if you create any, you can actually, it can be a variable, it can be a class, it can be just a function, it can be anything, it can be an object. Like modules just encapsulate logic. You remove like a chunk of logic that is related from your main like JS file and throw it into a module. For example, mostly you'll want to do this if you want like if you have reusable logic. For example, if you have like a function that only prints the name of the user or only displays the name of the user on there when they log in. So you don't need to create 200 functions for 200 users or 1,000,000 functions for 1,000,000 users. You basically create a module with that function. And then whenever you find you want to use it, you just import it and use it. So if you don't export, you cannot use it. You have to export it like that. If you don't export it, you cannot use it. And they have different types of exports. So let's first see the way we've exported that. Now we can come into our main file and then do an import now. It was the name admin. I'm not sure. It's supposed to be JS. Come on. Okay, what else then? So you basically have to provide a relative path to the location of your module like this. Yeah, VS Code is a bit slow. So you have to specify. If you don't specify that JS, you'll get an error here. So yeah, this is an import, and we've seen an export. So yeah, you can call our function here. And as you can see, we are getting admin on the browser. How do you make the input for the browser bigger? Okay, let's just, I think we can see it here, admin. So basically, we've created a module called admin with a function called admin. And then we have imported that module inside our root file. So let's go now to imports. We'll start with imports and then go to exports. So the import itself, there are different types of imports. The main ones that you will see is a named import. This is a named import. Named. Let's try to make it bigger. Named import. So if you have a named export, this one is a named export. Basically, what named means is that you have to import it using the name that you specified on the module itself. So in this case, you have to use the name admin to import it here. Even if you delete this and go and you hold Control and then press space, you'll actually see the module itself and the name here. So this is a named import. You have to use that name. And we'll see a way of changing this name later on. If you want to rename it from admin. And then we have something called a default export. So you can have multiple named export in a module. I could have multiple named exports like this, admin 2, admin 3, but you can only have one default export in a module. That is a key difference. For the default export, you'll see export default. If you've written React, if you've done some functional programming, we've definitely seen this syntax. Assuming I want to export for a function, you can just do it in line like this. But you can also specify an object down here. We'll see that also. So basically, a function can be exported like that, a default function. But if you want to use an arrow function, if you come here, and as you can see, we already have an error, syntax error, duplicate export name default. You can only have one default export in a module. So if it is an arrow function, like that, you see we are getting an error. And let's go first remove this one. We'll still get an error, even like our our browser is complaining, and our VS Code is also complaining. So in the case of search, you have to separate the export from the name like this. So you can only have one. That's a key thing that you have to always remember. You can have multiple named exports, but only one default export. If you come back here, if I put a comma, I can come here and control spacebar, and then you'll see your named I can't see the default export. Admin 2, admin 3. Then you can still go ahead and use them the way we've used this one. So in short, you can just take, maybe if you have related functions, you can have a module that exports those functions as named exports. Yeah. Next, let's talk about something called, and now let's, we have named exports and named imports. Then we have default exports and default imports. So for a default import, the syntax is a bit different. Just say import. It's called hello R. So it's sort of like the main export from that module. That's what it's called. It's called a default export. So like that, maybe can have something. Named default export. These things you might find like a crazy interview, and it just asks you what is the difference between a named export and a default export. So like you've learned that today, don't forget. It can appear anywhere. As you can see, we are getting that default export back. The difference between a named import and a default import. The difference between the two is that a default import can have any name. You see, we only have one of it here. So we can import it with any name. If we say, and then say, we get the same thing. So a default import you can import it using any name. You don't have to import it using the name that has been specified here. But as for named imports, you have to use that name. If you want to rename it, you can still specify an alias. Other import, I think use the as keyword as other. Import admin as other. So now you see our admin function is throwing an error because we've changed its name. So you see, there's still workarounds to it. For example, if you have multiple default exports that are conflicting in terms of names, like named exports in this case, you can, instead of going and creating individual models, because a single model can have only one default export. Instead of creating multiple modules with your default exports, you can simply rename it like this. Yeah. So as you can see, we have workarounds to that stuff. And next, I think we can talk about, we've talked about default, maybe a question before we continue. I've talked about a lot of stuff. Does anyone have a question? Okay.
Can you Joseph?
Go ahead.
Can you rename a default import?
A default import?
Yeah.
Like this one?
Yes, like that one.
Like doing this sort of thing on this?
Yeah.
let's try as, you can call it as what? Yes. Let's maybe, actually there are many variations of these things. It might be possible. So let's see whether we'll get we're getting an error, ambiguous indirect export. Say it's called an indirect export. Apparently you can't, but I think there's like if you go and read the spec is pretty, like you'll get out of that place with a headache. But if you go and read it, there are like many iterations of these things, so it might be possible, but I'm not sure about how you're supposed to implement that. Yeah, thanks for that question. I'll try to look if there's a way, and then we can like I'll share in the group. Any other question? That was a nice question from Albert. You can ask a question right now, because this is an important concept, and it will help you when you start like working with modules from like NPM. Yeah, let's continue. So what was I wanted to look at? I want to look at something called namespaces, because it's also like it's a popular like pattern when it comes to imports. So you might see something like this: import star, especially if you have been doing React, star as, let's say, admin from this. And most of these things, if you see import star as admin, it's likely that we also have a export star as admin. Like if you should go and look at the MDN after this, so that like you get a proper understanding of modules. So in this case, we are importing everything from all the named exports here using this namespace. This admin is called a namespace. You're namespacing everything. So for example, you have 50 modules, like 50 maybe functions in your admin module. This thing will be pretty large. It will be pretty huge. It might even span like timelines or something. But now with namespaces, you can combine all those things into one. And as you can see, we already have our functions here. Again, we're getting admin. So this is a namespaced import. It's a popular pattern in React. You might see something like import star as React from React. And then now, let's actually write a different one. I normally use React as an example because that's what I do on the daily. So yeah, it's just star. For example, if you want all the named exports inside React, that is use effect, use ref, all those things, you can do import stars React from React, assuming you had React installed, And then now, if you want, maybe I can just show an example of React. If you want to create a state, maybe for count. And this is not React, this is JavaScript actually. This is what we looked at yesterday, and we called it array destructuring. So basically, use state assuming we had something like that. So this is our namespace. It can be anything. It can be maybe Kenya. It doesn't matter, as long as you have named exports in this package called React. All of them will be namespaced into this Kenya, and you can access all of them using such a syntax. And actually, this is, as I've told you, when you get to learning React, This is JavaScript, and that's why it's important for you to know JavaScript before you go and learn React, so that you're able to distinguish between what is React and what is just plain vanilla JavaScript. You can write your own JavaScript like this. You can have functions, like you can have a function that returns values inside an array, and then come and destructure them like this. That's basically it. And you can, when you're doing array destructuring, you can name them anything. And that's why you can, when you're using state, you can call it count, you can call it whatever name you want. Yeah, so that was just by the way, for all those that love React, and all of you love React. So basically that's what a namespace is. Namespace import is. We can continue and maybe see an example of a dynamic import. So the dynamic import is a bit different from these other types of imports, in that it's a function. You'll see something like this. And then instead of specifying the name of the module, you'll specify the file location. The file location of your module. And then another funny thing about it is that it returns a promise. So what Pauline actually just covered right now, it's showing itself here. You can just say module, then console.log module. So basically that's a dynamic import. And as you can see, it returns an object with all your stuff. So it's an object, you can destructure it. And then you can take out admin. So basically let's comment that out. Then let's call the admin function here. There's an issue here. I think we did the destructuring wrongly. That, then that. Then now you can see you can even have our default export. So admin, like that. And again, you're getting admin. If you want to, the default one, you can say default, and then we can rename it as def. And just say def. And as you can see, we are getting default export. You can destructure, or you can just use the module, and then just chain your. Let's see another alternative way of you should be using these concepts. That's what I'm trying to say. Whatever you're learning here, if you don't use it within a week or two, it will be like you'll never even learned it. You can say module dot again, and then come call admin. You get admin. You can also do a destructuring like this. There are many patterns. You just have to figure out your style and then stick to it. Again, admin. You can still call admin down here. And what do you get back? Admin. So that is a dynamic import. This one. The difference between a dynamic import and these other types of import is that you pass in the file name, the location of the relative path to your module. Let me just grab my charger. I think 12 minutes. Just a second. Okay, so as I told you, a use case for this would be now, like, for example, if you are, the way we were talking about user types, you can have a condition and then load it based on that condition. And then if that condition is false, it should not load. I think this one is the one that is printing. I don't know that that's okay. Yeah, you see, it's not loading. I think my Chrome, my Firefox is catching stuff. So this condition can be anything. Can be anything. You can be checking for the user type here, or something like that. So basically, when you start doing supermassive applications, this is a good thing for performance optimization. What have I not covered? Also, you might also find another type of import. It's called it's an import. It's called a side effect import, and basically you use it if you want a side effect. Like, let me show you. Assuming we had like a file that contained a module that you just want to execute without, like, just execute it. You'll find something like that. Then path to module. Struct module.js. We don't have that module, but you'll also see things like this, and you'll also see something like this. If you are using a bundler, you'll be even able to import style. We have a style. Don't. You'll also see people importing CSS into the entry point JavaScript file. Right now, we are getting an error because we're not using any module bundler. If we were using any of our, where are the notes? If you're using any of our bundlers, if it is a nice one, you can actually you can start, when you're working on a JavaScript project, you can just use Vite to create your project, You don't have to keep on writing code as if you're still like before 2015. Yeah, so yeah, if you're using Yarn, something like that, we'll just show a demo of using a bundle, and we'll see how it will structure our application. You don't need to keep on creating your application from scratch. You see, you can select the framework. If you want vanilla, if you want React, Lit, Svelte, whichever. In this case, you want vanilla. TypeScript or JavaScript. I also highly recommend you to learn TypeScript, because it's basically JavaScript with types. If you haven't learned TypeScript, I highly recommend it, highly. Actually, I never write plain JavaScript ever since I started doing TypeScript. And with TypeScript, you automatically become a better developer, automatically. So I highly recommend it. But in this case, let's just use vanilla JavaScript. We just see the structure of an application created using like a module bundler. Yeah, so basically, if you go to the index, Vite uses ES modules by default. So you'll come here and you'll see your script tag. It has the type module. And you only have one entry point. And then when you come here in our main file, This is what I was talking about, just a side effect import. This one, is that a question? This one is a default import. This one is a named import, you see? And then, because it's a node application, if I want to create a production build, if I want to do that thing that I was telling you, to minify my code and uglify it, maybe I have trade secrets in my JavaScript. I've just come up with $1 billion startup idea, and I don't want anyone to go and inspect around and see what I'm like my code. There are plugins that you can use to uglify your code. It like jumbles it up so that someone cannot easily decipher like your trade secrets and intellectual property. So basically, you use this one to create the production build. You can actually just give it a try. Let's see, we are beyond time, but just bear with me a bit. So let's just say unbuild. And see what happens. Oh, it's supposed to install. And then build. So I want to use people to see what happens. So this one is basically installing the dependencies. You can use npm. Yarn is just a fancy way of using npm. It just comes with a few different things, but you should just start with npm. Install Node in your machine. Make sure you have Node. Just do node-v. Then you can also do npm-v, and make sure you have npm. And then now with these two, you can start using like Vite and all that. And okay, so as you can see, we've gotten this thing, building for production. 6 modules transformed. You see, our module thing is here. It's just a module bundler. It's just bundles. Like, you know, in JavaScript, these words are just like, you should take them literally. If you hear module bundler, it's just bundling things up. And then you can come here and see. It created this file called dist. And inside dist, we have our assets. So as you can see, we have our JavaScript here. So let's, what happened? As you can see, it's in one line. It's in one line. Like all the spaces have been removed and all that. And it's actually, it has created an immediately invoked function, I think. Yeah. So basically, this is it has been created, like, and as you can see, it's pretty different from the code that you wrote. This is the code that you wrote. You've written that, and main looks like this. So all the imports have been jumbled up together. Everything has been imported. All the dependencies have been jumbled into this one bundle. This is called a bundle. If you create a dist file, this is called a bundle. Yeah. So I wanted also to clarify about the module bundling thing. That is a good clarification. So what else can we, I think we should be summing up now. What have I forgotten? Maybe I can cover, let's see whether this up. Okay, so as you can see, let's see whether it will work. These things can get pretty messy, like this sort of syntax. So assuming I don't want to keep on like repeating these things, like let's remove this one, it doesn't exist. I just want to import from just these modules, something like that. If you're using a bundler, you can just import it like that. And as long as you have like an index.js file inside this module. So we'll see like a difference of that. So if you want to tidy up your code, you can have an index.js inside like a folder that contains multiple like bundles. Let's keep on using our admin module like this. So let's say this one is let's work with the default export. You can come here. Is that here? Then say export default as, then we give it its name. What was its name? It's called hello R. Then from slash, it's like a redirect, and it's a very nice pattern when you have multiple, like very many modules nested inside other folders, like all that. So like this, you write it like that if it's a default export. Then if it's a named export, just group them inside admin 1 to admin 3. The trick is control spacebar. Then you'll get to see all your stuff. Okay, so let's remove this causing an error. Is this error coming from? Modules, is it? So basically what you're doing here is just redirecting our you can see where this error is coming from. Modules dot, I think it's here. Let's just comment everything out. So yeah, let's go back to that index. This one. So assuming we want to import the default export LR, just say import. If we were using a bundler, you know, bundlers, as long as you have an index.js, it's considered a root, like a root file in a folder. So we will just do it like this, and we will get it. But now, because we're just using, you're not using any bundler, so you have to specify index.js. But if you're using React or something like that, that has a built-in bundler, you don't have to specify. You need to specify that the end bit here. So assuming we had like hundreds and hundreds of like modules inside this particular folder, modules called modules. If you had many folders, you can just have one index.js file that basically redirects all of them. You see, it's still pointing to where it's located. But now when I'm importing it, I'll just point to I'll just point to that modules folder. If you're using a bundler, you wouldn't have to specify this. So it becomes pretty short. Yeah. So that's something. Maybe we can add a bunch of them here. Not have anything. Spot default. Nope. So anytime you create another module, just come, copy one, depending on if it's a default, let's say default as up. Then you just navigate to where it is at, like that. And then now, where you want to use it, just import. You can see you also have, instead of having multiple like different imports for things that are located in the same place, you can basically just redirect your inputs like that. So that's a pro tip I've given you. So yeah, you should remember this one, because when you're dealing with a super huge project, you might find yourself going like very crazy levels in terms of like relative inputs. It's not strange to find something like this. And then path to module, then module.js. Because you have multiple nested files, so you can use this trick. You can use this trick where we have multiple modules. You just have a root index.js file that now just sort of acts as a proxy, like that redirects these modules from where they've been defined to be easily imported to where you want to use them. And I will look at this actually. When we reach React, we'll look at this now in a deeper way. I think that's all I have to say about modules. So does anyone have a question? You're also supposed to look at this code, but I'm pretty beat. I think I can look at it tomorrow. But basically, just for a rough sketch, you can see this one is it's an import. This is an import named inputs. That's if you go to utils, you'll find that they're just default exports. All of this. You can plug in the name like that. You just have one. I prefer doing like that, but or just have one like here, and then just add everything in, however many you have. But me, I prefer just plugging the name in front of the function or the variable, whichever. I think I can just do a quick rundown, maybe. I sent this link, it's in the group. You can go and interact with the code there. This is just markup for the form, and like, but or I think we can just cover it tomorrow. Yeah, but it's
let us cover it tomorrow.
It's way past time. Yeah.
You see, more people even have just left. Like we are 9 and we are normally around 16, 17. So
yeah, I guess that's it. So if there's not any question, I think I'll hand it back to Catherine to close us off.
Okay, thank you for that extensive breakdown. Look forward to looking at the code much later. Yeah, so I guess that's it. We'll meet tomorrow If you have any questions, you can just post in the group. So everyone, you can have a good evening. Bye-bye. Ian, I can see you're still here. Do I just click on the red button to stop recording, or it will just do it automatically?
No, you need to stop recording. So just go to the three dots and then go to
Okay.
manage recording again. Because if you do it without doing that, I realize it
Mhm.
doesn't save the recording.
Okay.
If you just close the window, hit a save.